There we go. That's better. How's everybody doing today? If you could do me a favor, in the chat box, if you're watching me on Zoom or you're watching me on YouTube, let me know that you can hear me and where you're listening from. That would be great. Thank you so much. Okay. All right. And if you have questions for me, please put them in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube, and I will be happy to answer your questions for you. So let's get started and let's see what questions we have. So hang on one second. Just going to look here. Okay. Let's see what questions we have today. Let's go here. There we are. Let's see what we got. The first question we have is, can we cater to investors and to production companies combined in our deck? Well, without delving deeper into what you're doing, yeah, I don't see why not. If production companies, you can use your deck for multiple things. You can use your deck to be able to pitch investors. You can use your deck to pitch customers. You can use your pitch deck to pitch vendors and partners, because everybody wants to know your story. And the beautiful thing about your pitch deck is it gives you the ability to tell your story to people in a way that everybody can understand. So yeah, go ahead and do that. That's going to help you. So I'm all in favor of doing that. I think that's super smart. Okay. Let's see what our next question is that we have. Okay, let me go find it. If you have a question for me, by the way, if you're watching on Zoom, which means you're part of our Zero to Pitch audience, then just put that in the chat box on Zoom. If you're watching on YouTube, you can put it in the chat box there as well. Okay, here's the next question. Brett, in today's email, I think he means that I put out on, if you're a member of our Zero to Pitch group, I put out daily posts to talk about building businesses, raising money, etc. So that's what he's talking about for our YouTube audience. So he says, Brett, in today's email, you indicated to get a lawyer before VC discussions about term sheets, as you did with Marcia, my lawyer. The catch-22 is the lawyer needing to be paid before we get the funding, unless the lawyer is a friend. Did you have to pay Marcia before you got funded? Okay, that's a really good question, because sometimes lawyers will work for free. And in my particular case, your astute question is right on. In my particular case, Marcia essentially deferred her fees until we closed our funding. Sometimes lawyers will cut agreements with you like that. And it was a bet on her part that we would be successful. And your responsibility, if you work this way, is to not overdo it, so to speak. So you can have relationships set up. There are lawyers that will work with you. There are lawyers that will work for lower rates. You have to find a way to make it work. That's the challenge that you have, when you're doing this, is you have to find a way to make this work and make the discussion work somehow, some way. That's what you have to do. But it's important to have somebody lined up, because especially for the term sheet piece of it, look, they can't look at the term sheet before you get a term sheet. However, when you get a term sheet, here's the thing, there's an expiration date on it, and it's not months. It's not weeks, it's typically days. So we want to be prepared for when that happens. That's the point. So you have to be prepared because you don't have a lot of time. So if you don't have somebody lined up on retainer waiting to work with you, it's going to be really difficult, to be able to turn something around and understand the legal issues that you might be facing. That's the point. Okay. Yes, your patent lawyer deferred until funding was in place. That's smart. That's what you do. You do all these types of things. You sell people. This is part of the reason why having a pitch deck is really important, because you're selling your attorneys, you're selling everybody on, hey, bet on us. We know what we're doing. We can help you. That's why these are good things to do. Okay, with that, if you have questions for me and you're watching on YouTube, put them in the chat box on YouTube. If you're watching on Zoom, put them in the chat box on Zoom, and I will be happy to answer them. Why I'm not seeing questions come up on our YouTube audience, which is really rare. And I'm wondering if something is wrong. Let me just do something here, if you don't mind. Make sure I do this in a way which doesn't disrupt things. Let's see what's going on here. Yep, we do have questions. So I don't know why they're not showing up in my feed like they normally do. But we have them, which is good. So let me just I'm going to do this a different way than I normally do. But okay, good. Okay, here's the next question. How do we test integrity of a potential tech co-founder? I have started to work on a trial basis with them. Okay, well, the first thing is trial bases are good. So I think that's pretty smart that you're doing that. So you get to see the person in action, which is really good. But let me give you some other ideas of what to do. And this is, by the way, it doesn't matter whether the co-founder is quote unquote a tech co-founder or a non-tech co-founder, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, whether it's engineering or whatever, because you need integrity in everybody you work with. So here's a great question to ask somebody, because it kind of goes to the core of their integrity and ability to speak truth to power, is tell me about a decision that you had to make, which was very unpopular, and people didn't like the decision, and how you handled that. There should be something that somebody had to do that people didn't like, that was against the grain, so to speak. That's what you're looking for, is tell us that. Tell us about that particular decision. Tell us what happened there. That's what we want to know about. So that's what I would do. Try and understand that piece of the discussion. I think that will help you a lot in terms of understanding their integrity, how they do things, etc. That's what I would want to know about. So try that. Hopefully that works. Now I've got my questions back on my other stream, which is good. So try something like that. You want to understand how people think, especially if you don't have history with your co-founder, which makes it even harder, to work with them. So you want to understand how people think. You want to know how they deal with tough decisions, things that didn't go their way. So other great questions. For example, if you're hiring a VP of sales at some point, at some point you're going to have to hire, and this will be later on in the company's life, but still a great question to ask a VP of sales. Tell me about a deal you lost. Everybody loses deals. Why you lost it and what did you learn? What you're looking for is details. So let's do this on the technical side of things. Tell me about a mistake that you made managing a project. What happened on the project? What were the mistakes and what did you learn? Try stuff like that. I hope that helps. Okay, let's go to our next question. Hi, Brett. No questions today. Okay. Sending an update. I did not take the deal. Okay, sorry about that. Thanks for all your help. Looking forward to rejoining the group soon. Okay. Not sure who this is, but looking forward to having you as part of the group as well. Okay, great question. To elicit integrity and a sense of power as well. Okay. If you have questions for me, put them in the chat box. Or in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube. And if you're interested in working with me on a more personal basis than this, where it's essentially one way, text questions, generalized answers as best I can, and you want to work in more detail with me, either on your pitch deck, you want to get a lot better, join my paid group for startup CEOs, Zero to Pitch Gold. Scan the QR code right over my left shoulders, and you can be in literally now. You could be in our office hours in about an hour and a half or so from now. All these things are available to you. Okay, next question. Let's see what we've got. Tell us about your life story. Buy my book. I have a book. It's called Learn How to Take a Punch. If I could find it, I don't know whether it's on my desk or something somewhere. I'm looking for it, but it's called Learn How to Take a Punch. You can find it on Amazon. It's at least a glimpse into my life story. So buy the book. There's an audiobook version of it as well that you can get. It's well worth the money. You can get I don't think it's in hard copy, but it's paperback. You can get it on Kindle, and there's an audio version of the book as well. Any of those will work. Okay, if you have questions for me, put them in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. Okay. Aloha, Brett. Thanks for the impactful resources. You're welcome. Well, I'll tell you what, today is there'll still be holidays out there. A lot of kids are back in school, at least here in Northern California. I think they started going back last week. My daughter doesn't go back to college for another month, which is kind of interesting, but it seems like things are a little slow today. So anyways, let's see what our other questions are. So I answered this one yesterday, but I'm going to answer it again today because I think it's a really good question, because we're all going to run into this. This is a recruiting question. How do you deal with a quote unquote high performing jerk? And we will run into these, what I call brilliant jerks, throughout our careers. People that seem really smart but are very difficult, create all sorts of chaos, all sorts of problems, but the promise is they're going to be so good that we can ignore all of that because of the potential upside and everything else. And here's what I'm going to tell you. Based on my life history and my life experience, it's never worth it. The brilliant jerks are never that brilliant. They're never that good. They cause chaos and problems. People leave companies because of brilliant jerks. So is it ever worth your time to hire them? No. Will you hire them? Yes. I've hired them because we always hope we're going to be the one to fix them. However, when you realize that they can't be fixed and that it's time to move on from them, you know what to do, right? Move on. Let them go, because if you don't, you're going to see other people leave the company because the environment is so toxic with them that it's just not worth it. Okay, if you have questions for me, put them in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. Okay, here's our next question. Who should work harder, you or your CTO or your CMO? Who should be the hardest working person in the company? You know what the answer is? It doesn't matter. There'll be times when you're working harder than everybody else. There'll be times when somebody else is working harder than you. Don't be a clock watcher. Don't be the person sitting there wondering when everybody's leaving the company. Don't have this culture, which we see in some companies where it's so bad and so toxic. Everybody's afraid to leave. There'll be plenty of time for people to work hard when you really need people to work hard. Instead, worry about results. It doesn't matter who's working the hardest. What matters is the results. Make that the metric that you look at. Make that the thing that you reward. Don't make it the fact that somebody stays in the office late because you're in the office late. That's not what you want. People will get burned out. They won't enjoy working there. And then when you really need people, which you will, to burn the midnight oil, so to speak, to work really, really hard, if you're pushing them all the time, they won't be there for you. So kind of learn, it's like, I learned this, I was very fortunate, and then I had some really good mentors. And one of my mentors, who's passed away, this guy, Jack Gifford, who ran Maxim Integrated Products, a very, very successful company, taught me years ago. He said, running a company is like driving a car. You've got to learn when to put on the gas and you've got to learn when to put on the brakes. And when you think about that with people, and you think about the analogy to people, you can't just push people all the time. You have to put the brakes on. Push, release, push, release. Do that a lot. That will really help you in what you're doing. Okay, if you have questions for me, put them in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube, and I'll be happy to answer them for you. Let's see what our next question is. Let's see what we've got here. Still the same. Okay. Let's go to the next question on our list. What should I never ask my employees to do? Okay. That's pretty obvious. What should you never ask somebody to do? What else? It's funny. I just saw a question come in, which is kind of funny. You should never ask somebody to do something you're not willing to do yourself. You, as the CEO, you set the tone for everything that comes in your company. So if you don't do something, why should you expect anybody else to do it? If you're not cleaning the bathrooms, why should you expect somebody else not to clean the bathrooms? If you're not working hard, why should you expect somebody else not to work hard? If you don't fly coach, why should you expect somebody else not to fly coach? You get the idea. All these various things matter. Everybody takes their lead from you as the leader. So you have to look at the example you're setting. If you want a culture that embraces certain things, and you have to be the walking, talking 24/7, 365 days a year epitomization of what that culture is. Every single day, every single week, every single hour. You can't turn it on, you can't turn it off. You have to do these things all the time. That's the only way that this works. So I hope that helps. Okay, the next question, I was kind of laughing about this, and it's such a general question. What else did Jack teach you? Oh, a lot. I'll tell you, look, there's a lot of good that I learned from him. There's a lot of bad that I learned from him. I would say, but more good than bad, definitely. But one of his other great sayings that he had was "Do not suffer fools," which wasn't his saying. He had two. I'll tell you, one positive, one negative. The first one was "Do not suffer fools," which means when you see people doing something wrong, don't go along with them. Don't embrace it. Do something about it. Don't suffer the fool, because you will be, it doesn't matter. The best run company has fools in them. Even a very well run company has fools. There's always fools. So don't suffer them. Don't let them lead you astray. Do the right things. Then the negative thing that he used to like to say, and I think he thought he was being very clever, but he wasn't being that clever. They're kind of two negatives. The first negative, he used to say, I'm not being Machiavellian. And you could be guaranteed that when he said that to you, there was going to be something Machiavellian that came next. So that was something I always told myself if I became CEO, I was never going to do. Try and be transparent with people, try and be honest with people. That kind of stuff, which I think was from an older generation way of doing things, I don't think it works very well. I think you just piss people off when you do it. So I wouldn't do that. So that's certainly one thing I would say, which would be negative. And then the second thing, which I think we can all fall prey to as CEOs, is hubris. In that people, you'll find this happens to you, that people will start treating you differently when you're the CEO. People will want to tell you what you want to hear. Your jokes suddenly become funny when you weren't funny before. People will start kissing your rear end all the time. And that starts getting to you if you're not careful. And it starts adjusting your thinking. And you think that you're smarter than you are, that you can't do any wrong, that you can't make any mistakes. And what inevitably happens? As time goes on, you're inevitably more and more prone to making mistakes. So I'll just leave it at that. Okay, if we have any other questions for me, you can put them in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube. If you are interested in working with me in a more detailed level, you want more help with your pitch and your pitch deck, scan the QR code over my left shoulder, right, where is it, right there, right where my finger is, for Zero to Pitch Gold. It's all of $150 a month. Tremendous value for that. There are courses in there to help you. I have daily office hours where I work with people, and the office hours aren't like this. They're actually meeting formats. We can actually talk to each other, get things done. And it's a group of people just like you. We're trying to build their businesses and grow their companies. You don't have to stay. If the group isn't for you, you can leave. So it's on a month-to-month basis. You can be in there. It's a great value. You're getting about $20,000 of value for about $150 a month. Okay, our next question. Listening to this important, this is from our Zoom audience. Listening to this important, by the way, our Zoom audience is our Zero to Pitch audience. They're already members of our free group, Zero to Pitch. Might be members of our paid group too, but they're members of our free group. They get priority. Listening to this important component of a startup. How did your engineering work on weekends as something they should do, or was it driven by the project deadlines and the employee needed to be self-motivated to do so? Okay, let me just stop right there and then I'll read the rest of the question. Yes. First of all, you have to kind of screen for people that understand what it is to be in a startup. The expectation should be it's not an 8-hour day. And again, to balance this thing out that I was talking about before about, the modulation, right? We can't just push people all the time. And it doesn't mean you as the leader can't be expecting people to work 16-hour days every day either. So having said that, you have projects. And by the way, it's not just engineering that has projects. Marketing has projects, sales has projects, operations has projects. Everybody has projects. And projects mean schedules. And if you're going to run engineering reasonably well, you have schedules which people have to meet. And the schedules have to mean something. So if you need to meet your schedule and you need to work on a weekend, then the expectation is that you work on the weekend. Right? That's fairly self-evident. And you have to hold people to account. So that's the way you should be managing your organization. So it doesn't mean every day, every week, but people should understand if they're committing to something, the commitment means something. If you don't have commitments that mean something, then you're going to have chaos and your schedules will slip. You won't get stuff done. If you do get funded, you're not going to raise your next round of funding because you're going to have nothing to show for it. So this stuff is important. You have to learn how to manage these things. I just did a video on this subject a few weeks ago, which you can find on the YouTube channel. This exact subject about how to do this. Okay, let's see what the next part of that question is. Personally, I am comfortable for the weekends. In fact, the only day I take off is if there's a family event or NFL season. Good for you. Or Brazil playing World Cup matches, etc. Okay, good for you. You should have fun and you should enjoy your whatever your passions are in life. By nature, I am self-driven, but everyone else is not so. Okay, let me stop there. So this is, you need people that are self-motivated in a startup. If people, and this is part of what you need to screen for when you're looking for people, because if people are thinking this is a normal 9-to-5 job, it's not. That's the point. So good for you for understanding that, but now you have to do something about it. Personally, I am not a fan of culturally of taking the break on Fridays by 3 p.m., then go back on Saturday as needed, think Friday evenings are family time. Okay, that's fine. That's your culture. You can run your company any way you want, which is fine. You don't have to do the way I would do it. You have to do it in the way that fits you and your cultural goals. But the schedules, the one thing I would say is the schedules have to mean something. Okay, let's go to our next question. If you have questions for me, you can put them in the Zoom chat if you're watching me on Zoom, which means you're part of my Zero to Pitch audience, or on YouTube, on the chat box on YouTube. Let's take a look. Okay, next question. When to make mentor? Heard somewhere to only make mentor to those who would first invest themselves in the company and sometimes in someone who's 2 to 4 years ahead of you on the path. Okay, don't really understand that. Second, how to convince someone to be a mentor. Okay, let me answer that one. Okay, so if you want somebody to be a mentor, there has to be something in it for them. And it's never going to be enough, by the way. So whatever equity you're going to give them as a mentor, it's never, ever, ever going to be enough, because a typical mentor is going to get somewhere, if they're very active, somewhere between 0.5% to maybe 1% of your company, vesting monthly over let's say a 2-year period would be a typical vesting schedule for something like this. It's never going to be enough, because typically mentors are very wealthy. So your small percentage that you're giving them probably will never add up. However, the attitude is everything on these things. If the expectation is that people are just going to want to be your mentor, and I get these, by the way, all the time, where people reach out to me, would you please be my mentor? And inevitably the answer is no, I will not please be your mentor. Part of it is in how you approach people. And you have to approach people in a way that's respectful to them, and somehow or other explain the value to them. What are they going to get out of it? And it can't just be money. So it's a little bit of a puzzle that you have to put together in terms of how you do this. But if it is a very needy kind of thing, please be my mentor, that's not going to work, is what I would tell you. So I don't know whether that's the answer you wanted to hear, but that's the answer. What should the expectations be from them? Well, I will tell you the ones that I don't like when I've done this kind of work. And even when I'm advising companies, I don't like it this way either. Advising and mentoring are fairly similar things. Is I don't like it when somebody gives me a schedule and says, well, we're going to meet 4 times a week or 4 times a month or something like that. And we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And you have these deliverables. And this is what your equity is going to be determined upon. No, that won't work. And I don't think with most serious people that's going to work either. The expectation should be that you are there to advise and help, as needed. If you're expecting somebody to do physical work, all the time, and that's a totally different thing. That's a consultant. And now suddenly you're going to have to pay the consultant a lot more, perhaps in equity and perhaps in money as well. So if you're asking people to advise and mentor, it is more to talk through what's going on, to listen, to provide their advice and guidance based on their experience in terms of what they are hearing, to have somebody that you can trust, that you can talk to. Because one of the things you may or may not realize is that as CEO, there are only so many people that you can talk to. It's not an infinite group of people. And that's part of the challenge, because you can't talk to your co-founders about all your challenges or problems, because guess what happens? They're likely to talk to other people. And now suddenly that can get around a whole company. You can't talk to your investors because you can scare your investors away. You can't talk to your spouse because you'll end up divorced or out of your relationship. So who do you talk to? Who's going to have your best interests at heart? It is a mentor, it is an advisor, it is a coach. Somebody who can provide advice that is in your best interest as the leader of a company. That's what you're looking for. Somebody who's going to tell you straight out what's wrong, what's right, what to do. That's what you're looking for. That's the kind of person that's going to help you, in terms of all this. So that's what I would be looking for. So I hope that helps. Okay, I'm going to drink a little bit of water because I've been talking for close to 40 minutes now. That's better. Okay, so if you have a question for me, put them in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube. Okay. It's a good question. What are the largest costs for an early stage startup? Okay, typically the largest costs for an early stage startup, and this is fairly straightforward, are usually people. It's usually your headcount. And the headcount thing usually goes for a longer period of time, by the way. So headcount is usually your largest cost for a long, long period. So you want to manage your headcount very carefully in terms of what you do, because that's where most of your spend is going to go. So be mindful of that. Be careful of that. With salaries, you want to be careful with salaries too, because you only have so much money. It gets into another interesting discussion in terms of what you should pay people and who should get paid what, in your company. Because if you think about it, you've got your co-founders, you've got yourself, and then as you start hiring people, you're going to have a team. How's all that going to work? Okay, well, who should get paid market rate first out of that group? You know who it shouldn't be. You should be the last person to get paid market rate because you're the CEO and founder. Second person should be your co-founders. Then who should get paid first? It's your team. They have the least amount of equity, so they have the least amount of upside financially. So you're kind of paying them. So the idea is the team gets paid first, then the co-founders get paid next at closest to market rate, and then you get paid last because you should, as a CEO, probably have the most equity of anybody. And then as the rounds go on and time goes on, you get to market rate. And also, by the way, this ties into my definition of cash flow positive, by the way, too, which is cash flow positive to me is not when the company is cash flow positive. Cash flow positive to me is when you're personally cash flow positive, assuming you don't have crazy spending habits where you're spending way beyond your means. But let's say you're spending reasonably. It's when you're making enough on your salary where you're not having to take out of your bank account anymore, and the company is cash flow positive. That combination of things, and that should go for your co-founders as well. So that's the way I would look at things. But yeah, the team's got to get paid first. It is difficult and challenging And for many of you, especially in today's world, probably some of what you're doing is probably AI based. And that is a competitive space to be in. You are competing with big companies who are paying lots of money to people. And there's no way, no matter what you pay them, that you'll ever be able to compete purely on money. There has to be more. And that's part of the sell, right? You have to find the true believers who totally believe in what you're doing and are willing to take that risk for whatever their reasons are. That's part of the challenge. All right, let's go to our next question on our list. Okay, and if you have questions for me, you're watching on Zoom, put them in the chat box on Zoom. If you're watching on YouTube, do the same. And if you want more, you want to do this at a higher level with me, join Zero to Pitch Gold. If you really are serious about growing your business and raising funding, scan the QR code over my left shoulder. You could be in right now all of $150 a month for about $20,000 of value. It's a great deal. If you join this month, I will onboard you personally, which is pretty cool. So you get some time with me, just one-on-one. And you can get started. You get started today. You could be in office hours in an hour and 20 minutes talking to me. So let's go to our next question. All right, the next question, is it a bad sign if you and your co-founders are fighting? Yes, it is a bad sign if you and your co-founders are fighting. Arguments are to be expected. Disagreements are to be expected. However, if you are out and out fighting with your co-founders, that is a problem. There should be, and this goes back, I think the first question today was about vetting a co-founder and about integrity. And this is kind of a little bit different question, but the concept here is that our co-founders, we should have a fairly similar worldview of how we see our company being built. And these are some of the things that you want to vet out before you bring a co-founder on, is that you should be seeing things fairly similar to them in terms of what you want to have happen. So if you and your co-founder are fighting about very fundamental things, like for example, in my history of building my company, I went through 3 sets of co-founders before I found the right group. So set 1 didn't work out. Set 2 didn't work out for different reasons. Set 3 clicked. In the first set, and these are people I knew, interestingly enough, which should reduce your risk, it turned out their view of how to build the company, and we supposedly had the same view going in, but it was very clear, I don't know, within a month or so, that one of my co-founders and I just had completely different views of what to do. And it wasn't going to work looking back on it in hindsight. And they ended up leaving. They started a competing company, which is another interesting story, tried to get funding and failed. Having said that, that's irrelevant. But the fact was we didn't fit. We were going to fight. And it wasn't going to be healthy. So I'm glad in hindsight that it didn't work out, because it was going to fail inevitably. It was going to fail. So you want to kind of talk about these things, about your vision, about what you want to do, about fundraising. That was a fight I got into with my third group of co-founders, interestingly enough, was I had 4 co-founders. One of them wanted to raise less money. I wanted to raise more money. And we raised the more money, and he just didn't understand. He thought we were going to get diluted more, and he was wrong. We actually were going to get diluted less, which I had to prove to him. And I actually had to bring my lawyer in, which really helped. She was great because he wasn't listening to me. So I said, hey, why don't we have a meeting with our attorney and let her tell us whether we did the right thing or not. And she walks in the meeting and says, what are you guys, nuts? In this environment, you guys raised $12 million? That's fantastic. And that ended that story. And he skipped out of the room, you know, singing and dancing, saying it wasn't his first rodeo. And that ended that. So, you know, sometimes you get into these fights with people, but you have to have enough alignment with people that you can go on. Because if you don't have the alignment, it's just going to become cancerous inside of a company. And then it just doesn't work. Okay, so I hope that answered your question on that. Next question. My first question was, whom to make a mentor? I get the trust part with judgment and intention, but in terms of how aged in the industry, I don't understand that. Like just 2 to 4 years of someone who's ahead, achieved it all, or both. I personally wouldn't worry about that. You know, whether it's 2 to 4 years ahead of you, I don't even know what that means. You're looking for people who've been there before. So maybe they did this 10 years, they're 10 years ahead of you. They've already had their success. They've already IPO'd their company. They've already sold their company. And you're looking for their wisdom and guidance so that you don't step on the same landmines they did. That's what I would look for in somebody. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, next question. Do you stream every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time? When I can. I try to. This week I did. Sometimes I have webinars which are exclusive to my audience who's signed up on my list, both in terms of zero to pitch and or on my email list. So sometimes I do that on Wednesdays. Other times I'm traveling, but as much as I can, I try to. I'm trying to help people as much as I can. So yeah, this week, I don't think I'll be doing it next week. I don't think I'll be doing it for 2 or 3 weeks actually, because I'll be traveling and doing some other things. So that'll make it a little bit more difficult. But as much as I can, I do. Next question we have on the list. How do you protect your startup idea from investors? Okay, I get this question every once in a while, and I think there is too much paranoia out there about investors stealing your idea. They're not going to steal your idea. They're in the people business. They don't want to steal your idea. Will they share your idea with others? Yeah, sometimes they will. Will they want to get feedback on your idea? Sure, because they're interested in investing. But are they going to steal it? No. And I think if you try and do the next thing, which is on your mind, which is, hey, I want to put in place an NDA, and I'm going to get investors to sign an NDA, you're putting friction in the deal, and many investors are just going to walk. They're not going to sign your NDA in all likelihood. Where is the risk in the equation here for you if somebody's stealing your idea? It's not the investors, it's your co-founders. That's what happened to me. So my first group, that same fellow I was talking to you about previously, who I got into the fight with, you know, about how much money we should raise and all of that, and who left and took the other co-founder with him in terms of how we were going to build the company and all that. He stole the idea. The idea for the company was mine. The IP was mine. And he stole it down to the pitch deck. Started a company, tried to raise money, couldn't raise the money, and failed. Which also tells you that you still, it's one thing to steal somebody's pitch deck. It's one thing to steal an idea. But they can't take from you your passion, your grit, your determination to do things. Very difficult to do. So I hope that helps. Have time for maybe one more question. So if you've got a question for me, put it in the chat box on Zoom or YouTube, and I'll be happy to answer it for you. I got two more questions at the same time. I have less experience than the other co-founders. How do I convince them that I'd be CEO? Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, well, super high level, since this is probably more nuanced than I can give it in all reality, but super high level. You got to assume the position. If you're the leader, then so be it. Be the leader. I will tell you, it's kind of funny, it popped into my head, but since we were talking about Jack Gifford, many of you probably don't know, but he was the original founder of Advanced Micro Devices, AMD, which is a fairly famous company. However, the first CEO of AMD was not Jack. He tried to be CEO, but the CEO ended up being Jerry Sanders. Why was this? Because Sanders could raise money. Gifford couldn't. So he who can raise the money, or she who can raise the money, they're the CEO. And that's what happened in AMD's case. So Sanders could raise money, Gifford couldn't. Gifford was a young guy, was 28, 29 years old at the time, something like that. Sanders was older, had more experience, had more gravitas. He was able to raise the money. So that's the way it went. So you have to convince people. If you're the leader, then you're the leader. I was, of my co-founders, when I started my company, I was the youngest of the co-founders. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You just have to say, okay, I'm the CEO. I'm leading the company. And just assume the position, just start being the leader. Nobody cares at one level, whether you're the youngest or not. What they do care is that you know what you're doing and that you're going to lead them to success. So that's the high level answer. I'm sorry, it's hard to get into more details over this format, but that's the best I can do. Okay, a related question here, which will probably be our last question today. Is a $10 million pre-seed possible in this climate? Yes. Let's say the tech and idea are truly revolutionary with no hyperbole. Yeah, sure. Okay, but I'm going to give you a caveat for this. If you're going to raise that amount of money, and I'm assuming right now, by the way you're describing this, that nothing is proved at this point. In other words, you haven't done any development work or very minimal development work, and you're going to try and raise money. And I'm also going to assume that you have no track record of success. In other words, you've gone through your career, however long that's been, you've done your work, and you've done fine work. However, from an investor standpoint, there's nothing showing the investors that you can make them money. So those are the risks that you have to overcome. That's the challenge. I have been involved in companies that have raised money on just a pitch deck. I did it on just a pitch deck. But the common theme of the companies, including myself that did it, is we had track records of success. We had a reasonably built out team, or we had people that were going to come on board that looked really good. So when you looked at us on paper, it was like a really qualified group of people that knew what they were doing. So the risks from an investor standpoint were pretty minimal when you look at it that way. And there was a big potential in the business. So yeah, it can be done, but it's hard to do it. And even the cases where it's been done, and it's been done recently, it's still challenging to convince investors that they want to bet their money, even when there's a big pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, for them potentially, if you're successful. I've been involved in a company like this very recently, going after a huge, huge market, like massive market. I don't want to say what the market is, and they were able to raise their money, but I was involved in the initial fundraising, and it was hard, for us to get that done. Not because the CEO wasn't capable, he was beyond capable. He was genius level, brilliant guy, still brilliant. And he's been leading the company. The company's worth billions now. But to get those initial investors was hard. And many investors on Sand Hill Road turned us down. So it's challenging. It's not easy to do these things, but you need these things going for you to give yourself a chance. If you just think, if you're just somebody coming in off the street and you don't have any track record that's going to show people that you're going to succeed, then it's going to be more difficult. Now, I'll put a caveat on this. With the explosion of money going into AI right now, there's a huge explosion. There is more of a potential for people funding CEOs without the requisite experience. I've lived through this before. I've seen this in previous booms before. Having said that, you can want to hear what you want to hear, and it may not be the right thing either. So these are tough decisions you'll have to make in terms of in terms of what to do. So I know it's not exactly a clean answer, but that's the best answer I can give you. Okay, I don't think we have any other questions, looks like, unless somebody pops one in right now, but I'll say thank you so much. If you're interested in working with me at a higher level, and you really want to turn it up, you want to give yourself the best chance of being able to raise that $10 million in pre-seed funding. You want to grow your business faster. You want expert guidance and advice. Join my group, Zero to Pitch Gold, all of $150 a month. Best way to work with me. I also do one-on-one coaching as well, but that's uber expensive. And I do that only by application only. So a very select group of people. But if you want something that's affordable, you want to get that level of support from me, pretty much the same as my one-on-one guys get and gals get, this is the way to go. So scan that QR code, hop on over. You could be in office hours in about an hour or so. So with that, I say thank you so much. Take care and have a great afternoon.